Well, welcome to the shed once again. Today we're going to be talking about bows and arrows and also arrow rests. All these bows, any bow is capable of casting an arrow straight. Every bow. How many times have you seen somebody shooting at a target and they've pulled back and they've let fly and the arrow has actually kicked up like that, gone back down like that, or that way, and then into the target, but off to the side. And that's the only reason that has happened is because the arrow is not tuned to the bow, or the rest is not tuned to the bow. So today we're going to be looking at arrow rests on bows, and also then setting the arrow rest up and getting to the paper tune stage to make sure that our arrow coming out of our bow is shooting a bullet hole through paper. That is what we're looking for right there, a bullet hole through paper, so that we know that that arrow is coming out of that bow perfectly. If it's doing any of these others here, it's going to throw our point of impact off and we're going to have horrendous arrow flight, which could result in personal injury to yourself or others around you. So, I've handed this piece of paper out, Paper Tuning Guide for Drop Away Rests, to our club members who have drop away rests at the Chinchilla Archers, and so that they can then take that knowledge away and try and paper tune their bows to achieve that perfect bullet hole. But there's a few things you need to know before you get to that stage there, and the reason why we may have taken the Whisker Biscuit off the bow and put a drop away rest on the bow is if you intend to change your arrows in respect to changing the length of your vanes, like these 4-inch vanes here with the helical on them, for hunting purposes, because we want to screw a broadhead onto the arrow and go hunting with it, we need, quite possibly, the larger the broadhead, the more it'll affect the arrow flight. So we need that arrow to be spinning, and also need it to shoot straight. Whisker Biscuit rests, because of the helical and the length of the vane, this arrow going through a Whisker Biscuit rest is going to destroy these vanes, and also impact quite possibly on the arrow, the back of the arrow going through the rest to give it a bad release from leaving the bow. So to get away from that, we're going to install a drop away rest on a bow, and all that does, quite simply, if we can see it here, is the arrow rest on here now. Once we come back to full draw or whatever, the little lever kicks up like that, comes back to full draw. As soon as you release, it snaps away and the arrow takes off, and it's not touching anything back here. So, but it needs to be tuned, this rest needs to be tuned to this bow for the arrow to leave in a straight position to achieve the bullet hole. So we've decided we're going to put on a drop away rest on our bow. That's fine, we can do that. You install them as per the manufacturer's instructions, but there's some things you still need to know when installing them. For a start, I have two lots of adjustment. This is a Quad HDX Ultra rest. Right. It's got horizontal adjustment across here, backwards and forwards. and it's also got vertical up and down adjustment here on the side here. Now that's great, so it's a fully adjustable rest, but the main thing is in setting them up is that we like to have roughly those adjustments, or this adjustment on the horizontal, in the middle of its range here. Now some bows you have to change the rest for it to achieve that, which I've got one over there, I'll show you. But so what we need to do, to install this rest is firstly put it on. We get an arrow here, put it on the string, flick that up there. We need to make sure for a start that when the bow is drawn, and which it's all in the instructions of how to install it, that this little cord here can be able to slip down, and you'll see as per the instructions a little line on here. When you come back to full draw, it pulls back just nicely, just to the end of the thing at full draw, and no further. You don't want to distort the rest, and that allows it then to snap away once it's released. But before that, we want to set it up. So what we've got is the arrow on the string here, all right, and then we're going to look down from the back of the bow here, look down from the back of the bow, and put the string here, split the riser of the bow straight down here, looking through the string, splitting the riser to the center of the riser, top and bottom there, and then look along our arrow shaft that's on there, and that string, the full length of the arrow shaft, should be splitting that arrow shaft. Now if the arrow's kicked out to the left or kicked out to the right, we need to adjust that rest into the position where it's just splitting the arrow, and that's its first setup point. The next setup point is this. The arrow sitting here like that for a start. We've got our nocking point, and also another important part of the bow is this hole right here. That's your burger button hole right there, and that is supposed to be the sweet spot of the bow, the center of the bow, top to bottom. That's the center. The arrow, when knocked on there and up on its rest, the arrow should be splitting that hole there. So that's the correct height, arrow height, where you set them up at. So you adjust your rest up and down till you get that right there, and then you can check your square on your thing here for your nocking point, pull it up and down it or wherever it's needed to be to make sure that that arrow is 90 degrees with the string here, splitting your burger button hole and splitting the string, splitting the riser through top and bottom, through the center of your arrow and out. And that's our first starting point for paper tuning once we've set the bow up. So we need to make sure a few things before we even get to the paper tuning stage. We need to make a few checks of our bow here to ensure that it's in time for a start. So what we have to do, doesn't matter which one, if we're shooting, this is a 60 to 70 pound Matthews Chill. I've currently got it set at around about 63 pounds, so it's not maxed out. So I need, and if you've mucked around with your bow, if it's maxed out, that's okay. But if you've sort of got it halfway in between its range setting, you need to ensure that these bolts, top and bottom here, the poundage bolts, that they are adjusted exactly the same. So otherwise, if it's half a turn out one way or the other, there's more tension on the bottom limb or the top limb than there is the other limb. So we need to ensure that they're exactly the same. And the way to do that basically is, I can do it on this one here, but if you've got it halfway in between, wind it in a turn, or firstly put a little bit of tape on the bolt here and put a mark on it. All right, this is just to determine where it's at. Put a little bit of tape and a mark at 12 o'clock. Wind it on both ends, wind it a turn, one full 360 degrees, full 60 degrees, keep going, keep going, keep going until they're maxed out. Count the number of turns, or whatever, if it's 2.5 turns or 4 turns or whatever, keep that in mind because that was the poundage that you did like to shoot it at. Once you've established how many turns it was, get rid of that tape, put a mark on the bolt, on the bolt, top and bottom, or whatever, and do it exactly the same either at 12 o'clock on the bolt, on both of them, when they're maxed out, and then 4.5 turns out, 1 turn at a time on each limb, all right, until you get back to the poundage that you were shooting at, and you'll know, as long as the white marks on your bolt are in the same spot, top and bottom, you know that that's perfect. Next, this is a twin cam bow, whatever 2 cams here, not to be confused with the solo cams, which is an idler wheel, and then a single cam down the bottom. This is twin cam. The idea is the cams have got to be in time with one another. And the way to check that is you can have a look on the cam itself, all the different little segments here, and where one of the bars, you just line it up with the limb if you can, or whatever, and have a look how much gap that you can see through there, and then you turn it round, and then you have a look at the other end, line it up with through the limb there, limb to limb, and see how much gap's there. If you've got more gap on the top than you have the bottom, or vice versa, or if it's very close, that's fine. If it looks like it's a long way out, then the bow, these cables here, the bus cables, need adjusting to bring the 2 cams in line with one another. They've got to be the same. So let's say that to do that you need basically a bow press to get the cams in time. I've got a little portable bow press here that I use on them, which realistically comes in handy when you get to the paper tuning stage. So, but let's say that the cams are in time, right? Cams are in time. Our limbs are fine. They're exactly the same. We've set up our drop away rest as per the manufacturer's instructions. Forget about your sights. Don't worry about them. What we've got to do now is we're going to shoot the arrow through paper. Now, sometimes with the rests, like this Hoyt Ignite here, it's got the Quad Ultra. I've fitted a Quad Ultra HDX drop away to it, but when the arrow sits on the string here and it comes through here, I've had to, if I can show you here, I've had to remove the flipper arm here and move it out to the next set of holes here so that it allows for my rest here, the adjustment, the horizontal adjustment, to be in the center of its adjustment thing. So they do have, you can move them out, and so that you can set them up properly. So middle of the range vertical, middle of the range horizontal, but that's on a different bow. That's a Hoyt Ignite, so you can do that. It's still splitting the string, splitting the riser, splitting the arrow, and away we go. This is all very important, because if you mess it up and you're shooting vanes like that, the last thing we want is the arrow kicking sideways, coming out of the bow like that, and the vanes contacting the riser. So it's going to give you erratic arrow flight, and this is what we're trying to get away from. In the end, making a perfect bullet hole through paper. Also, with the arrow on the bow, when it's sitting in this nice little spot here where it lives, the HDX drop away, whereas you might have your cock vane, when it normally, like if you're shooting a whisker biscuit, they'll tell you to turn the cock vane up to 12 o'clock and the other two vanes to go through the biscuit. With the drop away rest, I sit the cock vane outwards, and then the other two vanes here will run nicely so that they don't impact. They miss your cables here, and also there's no chance of them actually hitting the rest or the riser. So that's one important thing. The next important thing is when you're, if I can show you this, when the arrow's sitting there and you've lined it all up, this distance, the distance from the riser here to the arrow shaft, and back here, the riser here to the arrow shaft, should be the same. In other words, that arrow shaft should be parallel to your riser. It's got to be parallel to your riser, and that's your starting point then for your paper tune. Alright, now that we've got it set up, ready to be paper tuned, I don't have it set up here, so I'm not going to show you that, but it's quite easy. All you're going to do is set up a piece of paper. I just set it up on a cardboard box with a hole cut out in the cardboard box, or whatever. Stick a bit of A4 white paper there to it. Get back 8-10 feet from it. The important part is the paper's got to be at face height, or your height. You don't want to be shooting down like this or up like this, or whatever. You want to be shooting perfectly straight, so that you're going to shoot an arrow, and with the paper straight to you, right? You're going to be shooting your arrow straight through that piece of paper, and you're going to fire 3 or 4 arrows, whatever, through that paper, and then you're going to have a look at what it's doing in respect to these sorts of results. So if you've got a point high, knock low, it says here, knock low, point high, move the knocking point up. Now, that's on that one there, and then you've got the other way is move the knocking point down. These HDX rests are fully adjustable with, I said, horizontal adjustment and vertical adjustment. However, I don't like going and moving my rest once it's shooting through the burger button hole. It's supposed to be its sweet spot. I don't like moving the rest up or down with these dropaways to get it away from the burger button hole. I prefer to leave it there, and I will move the knocking point down on the string or up on the string to counteract those sorts of tears. But if you've got these sorts of tears here, left and right, which that's what you'll definitely have these ones, and quite possibly this is what you might have. All right. So if you've got like knock left, point right, move the rest to the right, yoke, tune, or timing problems, or the spine is too weak of the arrow. All right. Now let's say that your arrow is fine. You do have the right arrow for the bow. So if you've got the adjustment on these rests, realistically are for fine tuning only. They're fine tuning only. If you've got your bow set up, the string, splitting the riser, splitting the arrow, and splitting the burger button hole, if you've got massive tears, you've got problems or whatever. If you've got just a little bit of a tear here, or it's very close to a bullet hole but it's just ripping a little bit, you only got to move the rest slightly, and I mean slightly, very slightly. You don't want to go moving at 3 or 4 mil or something like that, because what that does, takes your arrow away from splitting to now sticking out the side like this. So, and at the end of the day, you don't want it doing that. The more it's hanging out the side out here, the more then you got to move your sights out, up and down to counteract this arrow now sticking out the side. What you should end up with is a set of sights at the end of the day, once it's all paper tuned, that are in the middle of the range here, and in the middle of the range here, and that there is perfect. If you've got them hanging right out the side here to counteract or whatever, to get it to try and at least hit what you're aiming at, it's not right. The tuning of the bow is not right. And that's with all these bows here. They've all got, this is my little boy's bow or whatever. This little thing's capable of 60 pound or whatever. It's a fully adjustable little bow. He's only probably shooting about 20 out of it. But I've got a drop away rest on that. It's a Quad Hunter rest. It's not the HDX Ultra. It's only got horizontal adjustment. So that means there's no vertical adjustment. And when it's got an arrow on the string, get it on there. When it's mounted to the bow, as it can only go in one position, it's already splitting the burger button hole. So that's where I want it to be. So they actually make them so that it's only got horizontal adjustment. So there's no vertical. So that's the sweet spot of the bow. I don't want to go mucking around with that, and that's why I don't like doing it on the HDX Ultras, moving it up and down. I like it shooting through the hole there, and I just manipulate then the knocking point on it. Move it up and down if the results from the paper tune says that the knocking point's high or low, or to move the arrow rest up or down. Now this is just to get your arrows flying perfect out of your bow. So absolutely perfect out of your bow. It doesn't matter if you're target shooting, if you're bow hunting, or whatever you're doing. Every bow is capable of throwing an arrow perfect out of that bow and hitting what you're aiming at. So, and the idea is to have it hitting the target, basically drilling a hole through the target. So perfect. One thing I forgot to mention about these quad drop away rests is the little flipper arm in here. They provide another flipper arm when you buy the rest. It's not a spare or whatever. If you break that arm, it's not a spare, it's actually a different height flipper arm. I think it's 1/8 of an inch higher up here before it in the bottom of the valley here. So it's not a spare. It's actually just to be able to raise that arrow up another 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch or whatever the measurement is. So just letting you know that that's definitely not a spare. And also, one thing to be mindful of using a drop away rest, and there's many bows out there like this now that are like this bow here, Little Bear Apprentice 2, that is fully adjustable from I think 15 pound out to 60 pound, and it's got a draw length adjustability from 16 inches out to 27 inches. If you go and install a drop away rest on it, and you've got a growing archer, your son, daughter, whatever, even your wife can shoot these bows. You can shoot these bows if it fits you, but if you go and change the draw length on the bow, you then have to undo the clamp here, loosen it off for the new draw length or whatever, and basically go back to the setup guide of pulling it back, making sure that the little line comes up here nice and level or whatever, and to wherever the little clamp ends up there, then retighten that back up. If you forget to do that, this part here, and just say your son's just grown, and I'll adjust the bow and give him an extra inch of draw length instead of 22, we'll make it 23. If you don't do that there, when he pulls back and he's got the extra inch of draw length on it, he's now put severe strain on this rest here or whatever, and he's got it under huge tension. He's not going to know. He's got it under huge tension here, pulling it right back hard. It will destroy the rest. So make sure that you undo the clamp, readjust it on the cable when it comes back in this little spot where it lives as per the instructions, retighten it back up, and you're away. Rightio, so back to the setup of the drop away rest. It's important that it is perfectly set up right, so it's splitting everything like I said. The whole reason to that is if once you start paper tuning and you start adjusting the rest left or right, up and down, or whatever you're going to try and do, you can run into some issues, severe issues with your sights. Like I said before about the sight, having it should be in the middle of the road, middle of the adjustment on the horizontal, and middle of the road on your vertical adjustment here. If it's not, and the sights are hanging right down, they can actually come down and hang down into very close to, especially the large guard sights, the 2-inch sights, whatever, can actually come down and hang into the window that the arrow's going to vacate the bow. And if your fletchers all of a sudden collect a guard, it could end up in personal injury to yourself. Especially with like these single pin sights here that are adjustable on an arm here. If I move that down, heading towards say 60 meters, it's dropping the whole sight guard down or whatever, and down closer to the window. So if you've got terrible arrow flight because you haven't set it up right, there's a chance that the arrow could kick up and collect the guard. So these are the adjustable single pins, the HHA sights. All right, and the other is just your normal fixed sight, like these ones here. This one here is just the normal 5-pin sight. Normal 5-pin sight. It's still got vertical and horizontal adjustment on it, and it's set, but it's completely out of the way. There, I've got this set out to 60 metres, so from 20 through to 60 metres. Here it's perfectly out of the way of the window for the arrow to leave the bow. Back to the paper tuning. Now you know how to have your paper set up, standing back about 10 feet or whatever. The main thing is when people try and paper tune, they can run into big problems because they're hanging onto their bow, come back to full draw, and they're choking the bow here, which is actually torquing on release, torques the bow sideways. So you can't, you have to have an open grip with the bow neatly back into this part of your hand here. Your knuckles, realistically, when you're holding the bow, should be on around about a 45-degree angle there. And if you've got a wrist sling, that's good. I don't use wrist slings, but pull it back. My hand then opens up, and then I just lightly touch the riser there. So back at full draw, it's only lightly touching it. The weight of the bow is pulled back into the meat of your hand here. You're now back at full draw, and you need to just squeeze the trigger. Just squeeze the trigger. No jerking it. That it'll send the arrow off, and you'll get bad readings on your paper tune every time. So you need to have a beautiful, smooth release. Basically, the arrow needs to go off, and you're not expecting it. So to get a perfect indication of what it's doing through the paper. And fire 6 arrows. Don't just get, you know, have one shot and go, yeah, that's good, or no, that's terrible, it's ripping the other way, or whatever. Fire a few arrows through that paper just to see and get a consistent rip. Yep, right. And once you get a consistent rip, then you can start tuning your bow as per the instructions. If you've got bad rips, it's ripping right out to the side, this is what I recommend. It does involve using a bow press. So whether you just go to an archery shop and have them do it, but however, they're paper tuner, they're going to paper tune the bow to them holding the bow, not you holding the bow. So if you're choking the bow and everything like that, you're still going to get bad arrow flight out of it after they've finished doing it. This is why I like doing it myself here. So went out and bought the gear or whatever to do it, and this way you get to learn about your own gear. And basically I found something on the internet when I was very first picked up a compound, and I was having problems trying to get arrows to fly right out of it. I found this on the Australian Bow Hunting Forum. It's in the technical and tuning section of the forum, and it's a little sticky up the top that's hard fixed basically to the site there, and it's a thread called Super Tune Your Hunting Rig, and it's by Robbie. Now that there, I've actually gone onto it, read it, and it's about getting exactly this, getting your bow set up with a drop away rest to be able to shoot bullet holes through paper, and then after that to be able to screw broadheads onto your, take your field points off, put broadheads on, and then getting broadheads to fly or to match the point of impact where your field points are. Field points with a perfectly tuned bow will shoot perfectly. You put a broadhead on the front here, and it changes the dynamics of the arrow, or whatever, can get wind plane and everything else, and you can get a different point of impact on a target. So the whole idea of it, to super tune your hunting rig, because it is your hunting rig as well as a target rig, is to get the broadhead arrow to hit the same spot, a field point arrow will. And the only way to do that is to have the field point perfect in the first place. So, this is what I did. I went onto the website, read the thing, opened up a Word document, copied all the text, transferred it to a Word document, printed it out. This thing here is now folded up. It's pages of information here, but it goes through every step that you need to know about setting your bow up right from the start to the end product to get it to shoot a bullet hole through paper and then get your broadhead hitting the same spot that your field point is. So, if you've got really bad tears in the paper and your bow's all tuned, you think that it's all tuned, it's all in time, the cams, the rest is right. If they're bad rips, you need to start looking at the bus cable cam cables, and if you've got bad tears to the left, bad tears to the right, or whatever, and this is all, remember, perfectly where it should be in a rough, in a close position, whatever here, and they're bad rips, you can actually put the bow press on there, and I can show you on Sammy's little bow here, because it's easier. The Matthews are different. They've got a single cable that goes out to the yoke on both sides of the cam. A little bit harder to muck around with these. But Sammy's little bow here, little bear, they've got split cables. A lot of bows are like this with just split cables like this here. So if you've got bad tears one way or another, left or right, if you follow the instructions as per that document there, and with a bow press or whatever, you take the loop off, whichever side it is, the left or the right, and whatever it says on the thing there, and you add a twist, a half a twist or whatever, to both top and bottom cable, so only one side or whatever, and then shoot it again and see what it does through your paper tune. You'll find that half a turn on those cables there, which what it does, it puts more lean on the cam, a little bit more lean on the cam here, all right, but it counteracts those left and rights. And once you get it to a stage, you do have to be careful. You can't go putting lots and lots of turns in. You just got to be mindful of your cam lean. You'll see on the paper tune that next minute your rip's just about gone or whatever, and it's just about shooting a bullet hole, but it's a slide off to the left or it's a slide off to the right. Then it's minute rest adjustment. Minute rest adjustment, and realistically, like, it should only be the horizontal here, backwards and forwards, to get that shooting a perfect bullet hole. Because like I said, we want the arrow basically to be, the string to be split in the arrow or whatever, and this to be in the center of all its adjustments, and then it is perfect. So that means that you haven't manipulated the rest so that the arrow is now pointing way out here, which then you've got to move all your sights right across just to be able to shoot it. Alright, so once you've done that, and you can look at your bow and everything's pretty much in the center, because you've only done a minute adjustment on that rest. Then you get your sights or whatever, and you can basically look straight down, split the string, split the riser, top and bottom like that, move your sight left or right so that all your pins line up with the string. So straight away, basically those pins should be in line with the string. And it'll only be a little bit of movement either left or right to fine tune those. Once you've done that, and you're sighting your bow in, and you're shooting bullet holes through paper, whatever, that bow is basically perfect. So you've already marked your bolts here. You've marked the bolt, top and bottom, on there. So now that you can physically see that bolt mark. If somebody goes and mucks around with your bow and they've got an Allen key and they've just turned it half a turn or something like that, you're going to see it. You get your rest and you get a little bit of white paint and you mark it where its sweet spot is, where if something so that if something comes loose on the thing, and whether it's corrugations or whatever, or you're going to Cape York and it's rattled the bow to pieces or something, you can see exactly on your rest where the sweet spot was when it was shooting bullet holes. You get your sight and you put a little bit of white paint left and right there so that you know that that's where the sweet spot is. That's where it should be, round about right there. So once you've done all that, you should be shooting bullet holes. You'll have beautiful arrow flight, and then you can take the next step via that, super tune your hunting rig paperwork there, bang your broadheads on or whatever, and then tune those to your field points. Some broadheads, the design of them is quite large. A lot of the, you can get things like this hanging off the front of your arrow. Now that there is nothing like a field point. So how the hell is that going to fly like a field point? Well, when it's sitting on the arrow and it's spinning perfectly, yeah, that's great, but we've got to get this thing here to fly like that, So some of the broadheads, like I say, big fat things like that, they can take some severe tuning or whatever, and some of them it's not possible to get them to fly like a field point because they're just not aerodynamically built that way. But some American heads or whatever, they're short and they're stout, like the little solids, the Oscuts, and there's hundreds of brands or whatever, but obviously the shorter they are and the more compact they are, and how they spin like beautifully like a broadhead, they're going to fly a lot closer to your field point than something that's big fat, bloody heavy, or not necessarily heavy, but big fat wind plane coming out the front of your bow. So it still can be done, but some broadheads just won't tune like a field point, and then you have to decide whether you want to shoot targets and have your sight spot on for your targets, or if you're going to hunt or whatever, which I do, you need to then adjust your sights for that broadhead rather than a field point, and just bear with it that it's going to be off if you go practicing with a field point. You're not going to hit exactly the same spot. So as you can see, once the thing's set up, you've marked it all, it's shooting bullet holes, there is no need to be out the club after that, shooting it and then getting the Allen keys out and adjusting the sights and things like that because it's shooting off to the left or the right, or there's something. It's obviously either your form that's the issue, if everything or something has changed, a bolt's fallen out of the cam or whatever, but you should be able to pick that up with a quick visual inspection of it, just to make sure, which you should do every time you shoot it anyway, to make sure that all the marks line up and everything's fine. There's no reason that you need to go adjusting things at the club. And every adjustment that you make on your bow, doesn't matter it's with the rest, with the poundage, except for the sights, but for the basic bow itself, that includes the rest and the weight, the draw weight. Even a growing archer, if you adjust the draw length, like this has got adjustable draw length. If you change the draw length on it, you've then got to go back and paper tune the bow again, or whatever, because now you just changed the dynamics. You've just given it a bit of extra grunt, basically. Or if you wind it up, you're now changing the dynamics of the arrow. So every adjustment that you make on this piece of gear here, you need to go home then and shoot it through paper and see what that's done to your arrow flight. So I hope that helps. I know we didn't paper tune anything, but they're the startup things that you must look at when you put your own drop away rest on and don't get a shop to do it. This is the troubles that you can come into. Now you can also paper tune a whisker biscuit rest, so there's no reason you can't paper tune a whisker biscuit rest, other than if you've got bad arrow flight right at the start and that arrow is trying to go through them whiskers, it can give you false readings, because the end of the shaft could be just hitting the bristles and kicking it back up the other way, coming out and then giving you a false reading. That's why I stick to drop away rest, so that there's absolutely, once the string's sending that arrow on its way, there's nothing touching that arrow whatsoever. And the readings I get through paper are the correct ones. And then I can manipulate it to shooting bullet holes out of it. Rightio, the next thing is, you've set your bow up to shoot these arrows, any arrows, these arrows. And you decide, I don't want to shoot these arrows anymore. Or you've got to shoot in bullet holes. I don't want to shoot these arrows anymore, or whatever. No, I'm going to try a different brand. Different brand of arrow. Guess what? Back to the tuning board for you guys. Whatever. As soon as you change arrows, or you change point, weight, or anything else, different vanes, you've got to go back to the paper tune, or whatever, to make sure that those new arrows are flying out of your bow like darts, basically. So it's important to understand that with arrow shafts themselves, the spine rating, and to have the right spine arrows for your bow. So for the first thing you don't do, or whatever, is shoot different arrow shafts. So you've got a dozen of these and a dozen of something else, and you're off to the shoot, and you've got two different brands, even though they've got 125 grain field points on the front and whatever, and the same sort of vanes on the back. They're going to fly differently, or whatever. They're never exactly the same. Each brand is different. The spine of an arrow is critical to the flight of how it comes out of your bow. So you need to know firstly you need to know how to select an arrow. Well, look, okay, 60 pound. I've got a bow that's 60 pound, right? You go onto the spine charts, the manufacturer's spine chart, whatever, and it says that this shaft here will be the right one, or should be the right one. It all depends on how long your draw length is, or how long the arrow shaft is, what point that you've got on the end of it. Normally on their spine charts, they're either with a 100 grain field point or a 125 grain. The good charts, and a really good chart, is on it's www.huntersfriend.com. Get on that. It's got the spine charts for carbon arrows, or whatever, that have got for 85 grain points, 100 grain points, 125 grain. Now, The Americans, they don't usually shoot anything larger than the 125 grains. Sometimes we go up to, I got 175s, they're 180 grain, I've got 200 grain, I've got 250 grain field points. So, the heavier the field point, the weaker it makes the spine of the arrow. Now, how they determine spine of an arrow is simply this. It's an arrow that's suspended 28 inches apart, and they hang a 1.94 pound weight in the center of the arrow. And how much that arrow bends, like that, is the spine, which is the spine number, whether it's 0.391 or 0.650 or whatever the deflection is. 28 inches apart, 1.94 pound of weight hanging on that shaft, whatever the bending is, that's how much the spine of the arrow is. Now, if you go, and they come in 30-inch lengths, so that spine is for 28 inches. If you shoot a 30-inch arrow shaft or whatever, and that's it, 30-inch or 32 or whatever like that, that shaft is actually weaker or whatever, because you've left it, 32 or 30 inches. So it's actually under that spine rating there. If you shorten the arrow shaft down, which I do for my draw, I'm only 27-inch draw. Or what, a 27-inch draw? It stiffens the arrow shaft. If I put a bigger field point on there, that weakens the shaft. So it's pretty critical to working out, or to know exactly what impact, if you start chopping the arrow or you leave it long, or what style of, or what weight field point that you're going to put on the end of it, what it does to the shaft. So it's always better to have over spine shaft than an underspine shaft. An underspine shaft, obviously, like I said, the higher the deflection number on their charts, so 0.351 and then 0.659. The 0.659 is a weaker shaft. The higher the number, the weaker the shaft. Alright, so the lower the number, the stiffer the shaft. It's very important because you might know that your poundage is 60 pound or whatever, but that could be 60 pound out of a recurve, or it could be 60 pound out of a bow, a high energy bow with cams that shoots big feet per second or whatever. So do you think the same arrow shaft's going to suit, just because you shoot 60 pound, do you think that the recurve shooting 170 feet per second and another bow here shooting, say, 300 feet per second are going to require the same arrow? I don't think so. They're going to, even though the poundage is the same, the higher the feet per second, or the higher the energy that the bow actually flings the arrow out, it's going to require a stronger shaft, a thicker shaft, a higher spine shaft. Sam's little bow here is a great example, capable of 60 pound at 27 inches. Note the little cam wheels on it here. Here's a Mathews Chill SDX. Here's 60 pound at 27 inches. That's my draw length. 60 pound at 27 inches. The two different cams on it. That's why this bow here is going to be a lot slower than this thing here. So the arrow shaft that I select for this bow is going to be weaker than the arrow shaft that I select for this bow here. So you need to know that if you go into the archery shop and that sort of stuff, make sure you tell them what bow you're shooting, what bow you're shooting, because it does matter big time. Round about what poundage you're shooting, and your draw length, what you're shooting out of your bow, and then hopefully, and the point weight. You need to let them know the point weight, so that they can then look on the chart and go, yep, this shaft here will be the one that you're after. And they've got to allow that if you go, and especially for your kids or for your wife or whoever, or even just for people like me with a short draw, that if you're gonna chop stuff off the arrow or whatever, that you realise what it's going to do to the spine. So it's very important with traditional stuff, where all these compounds, and you get some traditional bows are centre shot, but these are centre shot. Basically, all compounds pretty much a centre shot. Means that the arrow on the string, sitting on a rest, and it shoots and away it goes. It doesn't touch the riser at all. A longbow or a recurve doesn't have this centre. A lot of them don't have this centre shot availability on them. You can't go and cut, big chunks of timber out of the side of the bow, especially the old longbows and stuff like that. So the arrow, when you stick the arrow on there, it actually cocks out here to the left, and when you split the string with the riser or whatever, the string is straight down the middle of the riser or whatever, and it's trying to, when you come back to full draw, it's trying to drive this arrow shaft through the centre of the bow, which it can't because of the timber that's there. And so what it does is it actually got to bend around the bow, bend around the riser, and then come out and then straighten up as quick as possible or whatever to be on target. If it's too weak, the spine can snap the arrow, go straight through your hand. If it's too stiff, it's going to throw the arrow out to the side, and you're not even going to go close to hitting what you're trying to aim. So it's critical on those sorts of bows to have the right arrow for your draw length, that style of bow. It's centre shot, or it's non-centre shot or whatever, so that it comes out and is shooting perfectly on target. So anyway, that's the little thing about arrows. So whatever you do, don't shoot different types of arrows. Stick with the one type of arrow. If you want to change your arrows, then back to the drawing board. It might be only just minor adjustments or whatever, minor adjustments, and then you'll be shooting bullet holes once again. So that's our little arrow talk for today. Good luck, guys.